the letter you send across the country, the faith you practice without fear, the highway you drive that links one distant city to another. All of it traces back to a world shaped 2,500 years ago by an empire that almost everyone has forgotten. They built the first postal service in human history. They created the world's first declaration of human rights. They constructed a royal road so advanced that a messenger could cross an entire continent in just 7 days. They ruled over 44% of all people alive on Earth, a greater share of humanity than any power before or since. And they did something no conqueror had ever dared to try. They allowed the people they defeated to keep their own gods, their own languages, and their own ways of life. This was the Persian Empire, the first true superpower in the history of the world. For more than 2 centuries, it stretched from the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of India, from the steppes of Central Asia to the shores of Greece. It gave rise to some of the most legendary figures of the ancient world. A shepherd boy who built an empire from nothing. A king who carved a canal and bridged an entire sea. The vast army that crashed against 300 Spartans at a narrow mountain pass. And then, at the very height of its glory, it met a single young man from a small kingdom in the north. His name was Alexander. In just a few short years, the greatest empire the world had ever seen came crashing down. This is the complete history of the Persian Empire, the forgotten superpower that shaped the modern world. Our story begins around the year 600 BCE, in a rugged land of mountains and high plateaus that we now call Iran. In those days, this region was home to a small and unremarkable tribe known as the Persians. They were herders and farmers, living in the shadow of a far greater power, the mighty empire of the Medes, who had ruled the region for generations. No one could have imagined that within a single lifetime, these humble Persians would conquer the entire known world. The man who made it happen was named Cyrus. According to the legends passed down by ancient historians, Cyrus was the grandson of the Median king himself. Before the boy was born, his grandfather had a terrifying dream, a vision that this child would one day grow up to seize his throne and overthrow his entire kingdom. Gripped by fear, the king ordered the newborn baby to be killed. But the servant given this dark task could not bring himself to murder an innocent child. Instead, he handed the infant to a shepherd living in the remote mountains, and the boy was raised in secret, far from the royal court, never knowing his true identity. Cyrus grew up among common people. He learned to herd animals, to ride, and to live alongside the poorest of his future subjects. And then, when his royal blood was finally discovered, everything changed. Rather than punishing the boy, the Median king allowed Cyrus to return to his family among the Persians. In time, Cyrus inherited the throne of his small tribal kingdom, a kingdom that still answered to the powerful Medes. But Cyrus was no ordinary ruler. In the year 550 BCE, he did the unthinkable. He raised the Persian tribes in open revolt against their Median masters. The war that followed lasted 3 long years, and when the dust finally settled, Cyrus had achieved the impossible. He had toppled the king who once tried to kill him. He had absorbed the entire Median Empire into his own. The Persian Empire was born. Yet this was only the beginning of his ambition. Over the next 2 decades, Cyrus swept across the ancient world like a force of nature. To the west lay the fabulously wealthy kingdom of Lydia, ruled by a king named Xerxes, whose riches were legendary. Cyrus crushed him and seized his gold. Next came the ancient Greek cities along the coast of Asia Minor, which fell one after another under Persian control. And then Cyrus turned toward the greatest prize of all, Babylon. The largest and most magnificent city on earth, a metropolis that had stood for thousands of years. In the year 539 BCE, Cyrus marched into Babylon, and what he did next would echo through history. He did not loot the city. He did not burn its temples. He did not slaughter its people. Instead, he freed them. The Jewish people who had been held captive in Babylon for decades were suddenly granted their liberty. Cyrus allowed them to return to their homeland and rebuild their sacred temple in Jerusalem. He restored the holy treasures that had been stolen from them. For this single act of mercy, the Jewish people would honor the name of Cyrus for thousands of years, remembering him not as a conqueror, but as a deliverer. This was the genius of Cyrus. Where other kings ruled through terror, he ruled through tolerance. Every people he conquered were allowed to keep their own gods, their own languages, and their own customs. He governed not as a tyrant, but as a protector. And he recorded his philosophy on a small clay cylinder buried in the foundations of Babylon, which would be discovered by archaeologists more than 2,000 years later. Today we call it the Cyrus Cylinder. Many consider it the first declaration of human rights in the history of the world. By the time Cyrus fell in battle around 530 BCE, he had built the largest empire the world had ever seen. An empire stretching across the Middle East, governed by a single revolutionary idea: that a ruler could be strong and merciful at the same time. The shepherd boy who was never meant to survive had changed the course of history forever. But the empire he founded was about to grow even larger, under a new king whose ambition would know no limits. When Cyrus the Great fell in battle, his empire passed to his son Cambyses, who added the ancient kingdom of Egypt to the Persian crown. But Cambyses died under mysterious circumstances after only a few years of rule, and in the chaos that followed, the empire nearly tore itself apart. Out of that turmoil rose one of the most remarkable rulers in all of history. His name was Darius. Darius was not the son of a king. He seized the throne in a daring power struggle, crushing rebellions across the empire in a single dramatic year. He carved the story of his victory into a cliff face hundreds of feet above the ground in 3 different languages, a monument that still survives to this day. But Darius was far more than a conqueror. He was, quite simply, the greatest administrator the ancient world had ever produced. When Darius looked at the vast empire he had inherited, he saw a problem. It was enormous, sprawling across thousands of miles and dozens of different peoples. No empire that large had ever held together for long. Sooner or later, they all collapsed into chaos. Darius was determined to build something that would last. He divided the entire empire into 20 provinces, each ruled by a governor called a satrap. To keep those governors honest, he created a network of royal inspectors, known as the eyes and ears of the king, who traveled in secret and reported directly back to him. He standardized the currency, introducing gold and silver coins that could be trusted anywhere in the empire. He established a uniform system of weights and measures so that trade could flow freely from one end of the empire to the other. And then he built the road. The royal road stretched over 1,600 miles, from the city of Sardis near the Aegean coast all the way to the imperial capital of Susa. Along its length, Darius placed way stations with fresh horses and riders, ready to carry messages in relay, A journey that would take an ordinary traveler 3 months could now be completed by the king's messengers in just 7 days. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus described these messengers with words that would echo through the centuries. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night could stop them from completing their appointed routes. To celebrate the glory of his empire, Darius built a magnificent new capital city, Persepolis, a breathtaking complex of palaces, halls, and terraces decorated with carvings that showed representatives from every corner of the empire bringing gifts to the king. Persians, Egyptians, Babylonians, Indians, and dozens of other peoples, all united under a single ruler. Under Darius, the Persian Empire reached the height of its power and sophistication. It was the largest, richest, and most advanced state the world had ever seen. But Darius was not content. To the west lay a collection of small, quarrelsome city-states that had been causing him trouble. They had supported a rebellion against Persian rule, and Darius wanted them punished. These were the Greeks. In the year 490 BCE, Darius sent a fleet across the Aegean Sea to teach them a lesson. The Persian force landed on a plain north of Athens, a place called Marathon. There, against all expectations, the heavily outnumbered Athenians charged the Persian lines and won a stunning victory. The defeated Persians retreated to their ships and sailed home. It was a humiliation, and Darius swore he would return with an army so vast that no one could stand against it. But he would never get the chance. Darius died before he could take his revenge. That task would fall to his son. A proud and ambitious young king who would gather the largest army the ancient world had ever witnessed and march it straight into the heart of Greece. His name was Xerxes, and his invasion would become the stuff of legend. In the year 480 BCE, the new king of Persia was ready to take his revenge. Xerxes had not forgotten the humiliation his father suffered at Marathon, and he had spent years preparing a response on a scale the world had never seen. He assembled an army drawn from every corner of his vast empire: Persians and Medes, Egyptians and Babylonians, Indians and Ethiopians. Ancient historians claimed the force numbered in the millions. Modern scholars believe it was closer to a few 100,000. Either way, it was the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever assembled. To move this enormous army from Asia into Europe, Xerxes had to cross a narrow strip of sea called the Hellespont. So he ordered his engineers to build a bridge across it. They lashed together hundreds of ships side by side and stretched massive cables across their decks, creating a floating roadway nearly a mile long. But when a sudden storm destroyed the first bridge, Xerxes flew into a legendary rage. According to the historian Herodotus, the king ordered his men to whip the sea itself as punishment, and to hurl chains into the water to symbolically enslave it. Then he had the engineers who built the failed bridge beheaded. A second bridge was built, and this one held. For 7 days and 7 nights, the gigantic Persian army marched across the sea into Europe. The Greek city-states were terrified. Many simply surrendered, offering earth and water as tokens of submission. But a handful refused. Led by Athens and Sparta, they chose to stand and fight against impossible odds. Their first stand would become one of the most famous last stands in human history. At a narrow coastal pass called Thermopylae, a small Greek force blocked the only road south. At its heart stood 300 Spartan warriors, led by their king, Leonidas. For 3 days, this tiny force held the pass against the entire Persian army. The narrow terrain meant that Xerxes could not bring his overwhelming numbers to bear. Wave after wave of Persian troops crashed against the Greek line and were thrown back. Even Xerxes' most elite soldiers, the legendary Immortals, could not break through. But the Greeks were betrayed. A local man revealed a hidden mountain path that allowed the Persians to slip behind the Greek position. Realizing he was about to be surrounded, Leonidas sent most of his army away to fight another day. But the king and his 300 Spartans stayed. They fought to the very last man, selling their lives to buy time for the rest of Greece. Their sacrifice would be remembered for thousands of years as the ultimate symbol of courage against impossible odds. With Thermopylae finally cleared, the path to Athens lay open. The Persians swept south and captured the city. Xerxes burned the temples on the Acropolis to the ground, finally avenging the humiliation of Marathon. It seemed that nothing could stop him now, but the Greeks had one last desperate plan. Their entire navy had gathered in the narrow straits near an island called Salamis. The Persian fleet was far larger, but the Athenian commander, Themistocles, lured the Persian ships into the cramped waters, where their superior numbers became a fatal disadvantage. Packed too tightly to maneuver, the Persian fleet descended into chaos. The smaller, faster Greek ships tore them apart. Xerxes watched the disaster unfold from a golden throne set up on a hillside overlooking the sea. In a single afternoon, his navy was shattered. Without his fleet to supply them, the massive Persian army could not be sustained. Xerxes was forced to retreat back to Asia with much of his force, leaving a smaller army behind. The following year, that army too was crushed at the Battle of Plataea. The invasion was over. The mightiest empire on earth had been defeated by a handful of small, defiant city-states. It was a turning point in history. Greek civilization would survive and go on to lay the foundations of Western philosophy, science, and democracy. And for the first time, the Persian Empire had been shown to be vulnerable. The giant could bleed. It would take more than a century for the consequences of that revelation to fully unfold. But the slow decline of the greatest empire in the world had already begun.
The failed invasion of Greece did not destroy the Persian Empire, not immediately. For more than a century after Xerxes retreated, Persia remained the largest and wealthiest power on earth. Its borders were still vast. Its treasuries were still overflowing. From the outside, it looked as invincible as ever, but on the inside, something had begun to rot. The trouble started at the very top, within the royal palace itself. Xerxes, the once proud conqueror, returned from Greece a broken and bitter man. He withdrew from the business of ruling and lost himself in the luxuries of his court. And in the year 465 BCE, he was murdered in his own bedchamber by the commander of his royal guard. His assassination opened a door that would never fully close again. For the next century, the Persian court became a nest of conspiracy. Kings were poisoned by their wives. Princes were strangled by their brothers. Trusted advisors plotted in the shadows, raising one puppet ruler after another, only to dispose of them when they became inconvenient. The throne, once held by giants like Cyrus and Darius, was now passed around through murder and betrayal. While the royal family tore itself apart, the empire began to fray at the edges. Egypt, one of the richest provinces, rose in revolt and broke away from Persian control for over half a century. Ambitious governors in distant provinces started behaving like independent kings, ignoring the commands that came from the capital. The empire was simply too large and its center too weak to hold every piece together by force alone. To survive, the Persians increasingly turned to a different weapon. Not their armies, but their gold. Rather than fighting their enemies directly, Persian kings learned to bribe them. When the Greek city-states grew dangerous, Persia simply paid them to fight one another instead. Persian gold-funded wars across Greece for decades, keeping the Greeks divided, distracted, and too busy to ever threaten Persia again. It was a clever strategy, and for a time, it worked brilliantly, but it revealed a deeper truth. The empire that had once conquered the world through the courage of its soldiers now preferred to buy its safety with coins. The mighty had grown comfortable, and the comfortable had grown weak. By the middle of the 4th century BCE, a final king came to the throne, determined to restore Persia to its former glory. His name was Darius III. He was brave, and he meant well, but he had inherited an empire that was a shadow of what it had once been. Its army was bloated with mercenaries. Its provinces were restless. Its court was riddled with intrigue. And as Darius III looked out at his troubled inheritance, he could not have known that far to the northwest. In a small and rugged kingdom, the Persians had always dismissed as unimportant. A young man had just come to power. A man burning with ambition. A military genius unlike any the world had ever seen. A commander who would lead his army on the greatest conquest in human history and bring the entire Persian Empire crashing down in just a few short years. That kingdom was called Macedon, and the young man's name was Alexander. In the spring of 334 BCE, Alexander of Macedon crossed into the Persian Empire with an army of around 40,000 men. Against him stood the largest empire on earth, with resources and manpower many times greater than his own. It should have been suicide. Instead, it became the most stunning military campaign in the history of the world. Alexander won his first great victory at the Granicus River, smashing through the Persian forces sent to stop him. With that single battle, the gateway to Asia Minor was thrown wide open. One by one, the ancient Greek cities along the coast welcomed him as a liberator from Persian rule. But the real test was still to come. In the year 333 BCE, Alexander finally faced the Persian king himself. Darius III had gathered an enormous army and positioned it near the town of Issus. The two armies met on a narrow coastal plain where the cramped battlefield neutralized Persia's advantage in numbers, just as the Greeks had done generations before. In the chaos of the fighting, Alexander drove his cavalry straight toward Darius himself. The Persian king, seeing the young conqueror cutting through his bodyguards, panicked. He turned his chariot and fled the battlefield, abandoning his army, his treasure, and even his own family. It was a catastrophe for Persia, and a legend in the making for Alexander. Rather than chasing Darius immediately, Alexander turned south. He marched down the coast, capturing the wealthy port cities, and then took Egypt, where he was welcomed as a pharaoh and a god. There, he founded a great city that still bears his name to this day, Alexandria. Only then did he turn back to finish what he had started. In the year 331 BCE, the final showdown came at a place called Gaugamela. This time, there was no narrow battlefield to protect Alexander. Darius had chosen a wide open plain and had even flattened the ground so his scythed chariots and massive army could operate freely. By some ancient accounts, the Persians outnumbered the Macedonians by more than 5 to 1. But numbers were not enough. Alexander used a brilliant and daring tactic, deliberately drawing the Persian forces apart to create a gap in their line. Then, at the critical moment, he personally led a wedge of cavalry straight through that gap, driving once again directly toward Darius. And once again, the Persian king lost his nerve. Darius fled the field a second time, and with him fled any hope of saving the empire. The age of Persia was over. Alexander marched into the heartland of the empire in triumph. He took the great cities of Babylon and Susa, seizing treasure beyond imagination. And then he came at last to the ceremonial capital, the crown jewel of the Persian world. Persepolis, the magnificent city that Darius I had built 2 centuries before. A wonder of carved columns, golden halls, and breathtaking palaces. And there, in the heart of his greatest triumph, Alexander did something that still puzzles historians to this day. He burned it to the ground. Whether it was an act of drunken revelry or calculated revenge for the Persian burning of Athens a century and a half earlier, no one knows for certain. But the flames consumed the greatest royal city the ancient world had ever built. Its cedar columns, its golden treasures, its glory, all reduced to ash in a single night. As for Darius III, the last great king of Persia, his end was tragic. Fleeing eastward with the remnants of his court, he was betrayed and murdered by one of his own governors. When Alexander found the dead king's body, he is said to have covered it with his own cloak and ordered a royal funeral fit for a king. The empire of Cyrus and Darius, the empire that had ruled the known world for over 200 years, had finally fallen. It had risen from a shepherd boy with a dream of tolerance. It had reached heights of power and sophistication the world had never seen. And it had ended in flames, brought down by a young man who died himself just a few years later, at the age of only 32. But though the empire was gone, its legacy would never truly disappear. The Persian Empire fell. But it never truly disappeared. Its ideas were far too powerful to die with its kings. Consider what this single civilization gave to the world. The first organized postal system, with relay riders carrying messages across thousands of miles. A network of roads that bound distant lands together. A model of government that allowed dozens of different peoples to live under one ruler while keeping their own faiths and customs. And above all, an idea carved into a small clay cylinder 25 centuries ago. The radical notion that a ruler had a duty to respect the people he governed. When Alexander conquered Persia, he did not erase it. He fell in love with it. He adopted Persian dress, Persian customs, and Persian methods of rule. He tried to blend the cultures of East and West into a single new world. The empire that followed his death carried Persian ideas deep into the Mediterranean, where they would influence Greece, Rome, and everything that came after. The Romans studied the Persian system of provinces and roads, and built their own empire upon similar foundations. The story of Cyrus freeing the Jewish people was written into the Hebrew Bible, where he remains the only foreign ruler ever called a Messiah, a chosen one. His name has echoed through religious tradition for over 2,000 years. And in the modern age, when the ancient Cyrus cylinder was rediscovered, it was hailed around the world as a symbol of tolerance and human dignity. A replica sits in the headquarters of the United Nations to this day. Not bad for an empire that almost everyone has forgotten. The Persians were not perfect. They were conquerors, like all the great powers of their age, but they proved something that still matters 25 centuries later, that an empire could be built not only on the edge of a sword, but on the strength of an idea. That diversity could be a source of power rather than weakness. That mercy could be mightier than cruelty. The palaces of Persia are dust. Its kings are bones. Its armies are long since scattered to the wind. But the ideas they pioneered live on in every corner of our modern world. This was the story of the Persian Empire, the forgotten superpower that shaped the world we live in today. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Aether Stories for more deep dives into the civilizations that shaped our world. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Thank you for watching. Until next time.